I asked some people in the House and the Senate. I asked a couple of fiction writers. I asked some business leaders. What do you think would have happened to the economy if a week ago everybody on that baseball diamond had been shot and killed? If we were a nation in mourning today and we were just finishing up the last funeral, the last flag-draped coffin, what would America look like today, a week later? So I've put all of them together. Now, they've all said, don't use my name. I think except for Brad Thor, who was really like, I don't care. So I'm not going to tell you who said what, and this is pure fiction, pure speculation. The reason why I'm doing it is twofold. One, I don't think that we have any idea how fragile, how close to the edge we really are, and how one big event can change everything. Now, I didn't tell these guys what my speculation was. I just asked them a series of questions. What would the Fed do? What would DHS do? What would the president do? What would Congress do? What would the Senate do? What would happen on Wall Street? What would North Korea do? Russia? What would happen over in Europe and the Middle East? I just asked a series of questions and let them fill in the blanks. I'm going to give you their scenario, the composite scenario of what we would be looking at America today had we spent the last week burying congressmen and senators. It's coming up in about a half an hour. It is truly remarkable, truly remarkable. It was exactly 1 week ago that James T. Hodgkinson opened fire on 30 Republican congressmen as they practiced for a charity baseball game in Virginia. Witnesses say, and police now confirm, 50 to 100 shots were fired. It took 9 minutes for the police to officially respond, after which they engaged Hodgkinson in a 5-minute shootout. That means the assassin had 14 total minutes to get off as many shots as possible, and anyone could see the Republicans were sitting ducks. In the end, after between 50 and 100 shots, 14 minutes, and 30 targets, only 5 people were injured. Only one of them was injured critically and is recovering. We know that the majority House Whip, Steve Scalise, went under the knife several times, had multiple surgeries over the weekend, but his condition has now been upgraded from critical to severe. And if it wasn't for the truly heroic actions of 2 Capitol Police officers who were there in the security detail, all of this would have been much, much worse. In fact, I'm going to go beyond that. We spent a week talking about, wow, how lucky these congressmen were, how lucky they all were to have the security there, to be able to minimize the damage that was received. How do you explain how a shooter with 2 guns who fired 50 to 100 rounds, firing 14 minutes into a crowd of 30 people, not only didn't kill anyone, but only managed to injure 5 people? How do you explain that? We know now that the act was premeditated. A week ago, we didn't know if this guy just walked up and said to a congressman, hey, are these Republicans or Democrats? And then just happened to have a gun with him. No. We know now that this was premeditated. We know that he was an assassin because he had a list of all of the Republicans he was planning on killing. The planning alone, the level of planning that was involved. He had the means, he had the motivation, he had the will. He was willing to give his life to kill as many Republican congressmen as he could. How did this guy fail? Is it perhaps divine providence? Now, to answer this, I wanted to come up with a way to show you what I think we need to imagine here. We need to see in our mind's eye what the world would be like today, a week later, as we were finally putting the last coffin in the ground. What would our country look like during the next hours, the next few days, and the next weeks. What would be happening today if he would have been successful in taking out 30 Republican congressmen? So here's what I did. Over the weekend, I reached out to security experts. I wrote out to a few fiction writers, a few business people, some actual lawmakers, some senators, some congressmen. And I said, look, I'm not asking you to tell me exactly. I'm asking you to tell me what your gut says, knowing the situation and your area of expertise. What do you think would have happened in a realistic scenario? I have taken them and folded them all into one cohesive storyline to show you what these many experts all believe in their area of expertise would have happened. The next day, a week last Thursday, the opening bell for the New York Stock Exchange would be set to ring. But the futures would be down so far that we probably would have closed it and waited until the following Monday. So the stock exchange, just like it did on 9/11, we hold it until the following Monday, until we can get our sea legs. When we rang the bell Monday morning, we needed to have a rally in the stock market. The president probably would have said, go spend money. The futures would be way down, leading into the open as the rest of the world would believe America had finally cracked. Within 5 minutes, experts tell me they think the New York Stock Exchange, the circuit breakers would have been tripped and the markets would have been shut down. They would have tried to open those circuit breakers 2 more times to open the markets, only to have even bigger drops as people all rushed in to get out of the stock market. They would have then announced some Orwellian week of mourning that was going to be announced, would give the markets a chance to remain closed until the following week. Behind the scenes, the Federal Reserve would enact massive, highly secretive futures manipulation to help inject stability. This is what happened after 9/11. This is what has happened before the Great Depression. They close the market. They get everybody who has big money and say, you have to get in on these futures. As the markets remain closed, the dollar would go into a free fall. Countries owning large amounts of U.S. debt would begin to contemplate dumping their sovereign funds and their dollar reserves. In the end, we believe they would decide to wait and see if things would worsen for the United States in the next few weeks. Partisan media would begin to stir the pot. In response, the violent leftists, such as Antifa, would take their movements to an entirely new level. Far-right counter-protests would engage them in the streets, and this would happen in most major metropolitan areas of the country. But the rest of the country would be frightened watching it and not know what to do. Then copycat attacks would begin on more local and federal lawmakers, possibly on the media as well. Congress would then go into action to decide we need to update the Patriot Act, a new Patriot Act-style law that would enable the NSA to go after Americans planning riots and attacks. Hate speech laws would crack down on Facebook and Twitter. The American president would make a speech calling for quick action. We need to act right now on health care reform, tax reform, and the balance of the Trump agenda. We need to send a message to the country and to those who oppose that the Donald J. Trump administration will not be deterred. We also need to provide security detail for every member of Congress and or a concealed carry permit for every member of Congress. Special elections would be called to replace the 30 congressmen that were killed, so all the legislation could be fast-tracked. Rioting would intensify. Polling areas would be threatened with firebombing if they opened as scheduled. Martial law would be declared to ensure peaceful elections. Countries such as China, Brazil, and India, all the BRICS nations, would see their chance and begin dumping U.S. sovereign funds. Worst case scenario, the dollar would nosedive. Martial law would stay in effect until the economy would stabilize. Our enemies abroad would look to capitalize on our weakness and the preoccupation with our internal problems. Iran would close the Straits of Hormuz. China mobilizing on the North Korean border, and Russia would finally fully invade the Ukraine. This, the experts that I went to all agreed would happen in the first month. Some have said that if Hodgkin's would have been successful, it would have created the largest social and political shift in modern history. I believe that's true. But in 14 minutes, with 2 guns, 50 to 100 shots, a plan, rehearsal in the woods, a kill list. How was it he was only able to shoot and hit 5 people and not kill any of them? We were at the doorstep to what could have been the largest flashpoint in our nation's history. What happened a week ago? Most of us don't even care a week later. Most of us now look at this as old news. What we were all talking about last week, and we were all saying we have to have more tolerance for one another, that's long forgotten. That happened before last weekend. I believe this was divine providence. I fully believe that God intervened in this. Perhaps those Capitol Police officers, this was the day they were born to live. Perhaps the flight paths of the bullets were changed. More likely, vision and fear was intensified in him as he squeezed the trigger. But I believe in just as much as I did in the American Revolution, it was God that made that happen. I believe in many ways, as Thomas Jefferson said, when I realize that God is just, I tremble for my country because we wouldn't stop slavery. We were not worthy of his divine protection while we were enslaving people. We're not really worthy of his divine providence and protection now. But for some reason, I am very grateful that he gave it to us last week after looking at what could have been happening today.